Jim.
Thanks very much, Prime Minister. And as the PM has said today, as you know, we've released the Tax Expenditure and Insights Statement, and it details the concessions, exemptions, deductions and other features of Australia's tax system. This statement is released every year by governments of both political persuasions in order to comply with the Charter of Budget Honesty. We said from opposition days that we would make it more comprehensive and more accessible and more meaningful so that people can get a better understanding of the different parts of our tax system, and that's what the Treasury has done in this document. It's important to understand what the tax expenditure statement is not. It's not a statement of government policy or even policy intent. It shouldn't be read that way. It's an honest reporting of the facts, what the various concessions are, who benefits from them and how much they cost the budget. We've tried to be upfront in our time in office about the challenges in our economy and in our budget as well, and I think people are pretty familiar with them by now. We inherited $1 trillion of debt, which is getting more and more expensive to service as interest rates go up. We've got persistent and growing spending pressures in health, the NDIS, aged care and, of course, defence as well. Now, in the near term in the budget, we're doing pretty well from a combination of higher commodity prices, low unemployment and the beginnings of stronger wages growth. But beyond the next couple of years, the budget pressures are intensifying rather than easing. This is the mess that we were left, and this is the mess that we are trying to clean up. And the announcement that the Prime Minister has just made is part of that effort. Now, in the past week or so, there's been a welcome debate about the sustainability of some of the more generous tax concessions in our superannuation system. And what the tax expenditure statement shows is that the cost in revenue foregone from super tax breaks is about $50 billion a year. And that will surpass the cost of the age pension, as I've said before, by around 2050. Now, this debate, or this part of the debate, began when we released the proposed objective of superannuation, which is about making sure its purpose is to deliver a dignified retirement for working people. That's what super is for, and when that objective can be satisfied while also making our economy stronger and our society stronger, then even better. But to achieve its true purpose and to live up to its full potential, we need to make sure that our superannuation system is equitable and that it's sustainable. And we care deeply about the future of the superannuation system. You know, this is a proud creation of the Australian Labor movement. We have always tried to protect it when the Liberals have tried to wreck it or hack away at it. And we have a duty, and we take this duty very seriously, to make sure that superannuation is affordable and sustainable into the future. We have a great superannuation system. It is absolutely world-class, but it's not perfect. And one of the imperfections is the ongoing and growing costs of some of these tax breaks. Now, the tax breaks for contributions to super and earnings from super are generous, and they should be, because they help people save more money for their retirement, which is what superannuation is for. But the cost of these tax breaks is overwhelmingly skewed towards a small number of people with high balances, with balances well beyond what's required for a comfortable and a dignified retirement. Now, we don't begrudge anyone who has made a lot of money or saved a lot of money or takes advantage of the tax breaks that are legitimately available to them. We want to make that clear. If you've done well in super, that's a good thing. We are not going out of our way to begrudge people who've done well for themselves. I think that's an important thing to note. And we are not coming after, we are not trying to diminish anybody's superannuation balance. As the Prime Minister said, this is a prospective change that comes in a couple of years' time, and it's about future earnings over a certain balance that people have. And we think at a really crucial time for our budget, we need to make a serious assessment of what's affordable and what's not affordable, and we want to make sure that whatever we provide in the tax system is fair, and I think it's, for any objective observer, the idea that ordinary working people subsidise incredibly generous tax breaks for people with millions and millions of dollars in superannuation doesn't stack up. The average superannuation balance is about $150,000. And the few people with balances above $3 million hold an average of almost $6 million in their accounts. As the Prime Minister said, 17 people have got more than 100 million, one person's got more than 400 million. And think about this example. A $100 million fund earning a 5% return receives a tax break upwards of $1.5 million a year compared to a return outside of super if it was taxed at the marginal rate. So it takes 100 average wage earners paying the average amount of tax to pay the tax break for that single super account every year. 100 ordinary people to fund with their taxes the tax break on someone with $100 million in super. And every dollar that's spent on a tax break for people with tens of millions of dollars in super is a borrowed dollar that makes the deficit bigger. If you've got millions in super, that's impressive, obviously. There'll still be tax concessions for you. They just won't be quite as generous as they were before. Our current system provides tax breaks for contributions and earnings in accumulation and for withdrawals and earnings in the pension phase. All four parts of the current system will stay in place. And as the Prime Minister said, after Cabinet met today and the Expenditure Review Committee last night, we do intend to make this one modest adjustment to tax concessions on earnings for super balances over $3 million, which is just 0.5% of Australians with superannuation accounts. Earnings on balances above this amount will attract a concessional headline tax rate of 30% instead of 15%. Earnings corresponding to funds under $3 million will continue to be taxed at the same headline rate of 15%. Now, what this means is 100% of Australians with super will continue to receive generous tax breaks. 99.5% of Australians will be completely unaffected by the changes that we are announcing today. If you're a part of the 1/2% with more than $3 million, you'll still get tax concessions. They will just be a little bit less generous. This isn't about limiting the amount of super you can accumulate. It's just about how generous the tax concessions are on it. It'll apply to the 25-26 income year, so that's after the election. This policy will go to the people, and the Prime Minister and I think that is very important. It will improve the budget position by $900 million over the forwards, $2 billion in its first full year and $3.2 billion over 5 years. And I've given you that 5-year number because I wanted you to see it to include one of the full years in it, so 3.2 over 5 years. It's prospective on future earnings, not retrospective, and it doesn't come in for more than 2 years. Now, the government will undertake some targeted consultation on the implementation of this measure between now and the budget as well. There is a lot of complexity in the system. For example, it is our intention to include defined benefit schemes. This will require some consultation to make sure that we get that detail right. If we can include defined benefit schemes in what we're proposing today, we would like to, but we want to speak to the sector about that. There is some complexity there as well. No superannuation tax change proposed by the government will take effect this term of the parliament. And if this is about one thing, it's about responsible economic management. I'm confident that Australians will see this change as modest and reasonable and fair, but one which makes a difference to the sustainability and affordability of the superannuation system that we cherish. I think it's good that more people have become aware over the course of the last week or so about some of the features of the tax concessions in superannuation. I know that this is and can be a contentious area, but equally, we take our responsibility to manage the budget in a common sense way very, very seriously. We are interested in the right path here and not just the path of least resistance. Now, one final thing about our opponents. These are the same people who gave us $1 trillion in debt and deficits as far as the eye can see. They now want to borrow even more and have even bigger deficits in order to give the most generous tax breaks to people with tens of millions of dollars in super. In 2016, they jacked up taxes on superannuation to the tune of $5 billion. And at the time, Angus Taylor said it's totally inappropriate that someone who's contributed millions and millions of dollars continues to get those 15% concessions. That's what Angus Taylor said in 2016 when they increased taxes on super. If they want to vote against this change and try and prevent this change, then they can explain to people why. They're not prepared to back energy bill relief for pensioners. They're not prepared to back people fleeing domestic violence with more affordable homes. They're not prepared to back manufacturing jobs and a broader, deeper industrial base in this country. But they are prepared to go to war for the 1/2% of people with more than $3 million of superannuation in their accounts. They can explain that to the Australian people. We take our responsibilities seriously. This is about responsible economic management. We think we've struck the right balance here, and we're confident that we have.
David Crowe.
There's one change in